What if I told you that becoming a millionaire is no longer the finish line? For a lot of Americans, $1 million still sounds like the number where everything changes. You imagine the mortgage disappearing, the retirement account finally looking enormous, the freedom to tell your boss, actually, I'm good. Maybe even the ability to book a vacation without checking your bank balance first. But here's the uncomfortable part. In 2026, $1 million can be a great financial milestone, and still leave you surprisingly far away from the life you imagine when you hear the word wealthy. Because there's a difference between having $1 million and having enough money that your future feels genuinely secure. And there's an even bigger difference between becoming a millionaire and becoming a multi-millionaire. So before you look at your age, your salary, your 401k, or your brokerage account and ask, am I behind? I want you to ask a better question. Are my financial decisions actually putting me on the track to becoming a multi-millionaire? Because those are not the same thing. My name is Della, and on this channel, we simplify investing, personal finance, and wealth building so you can make smarter financial decisions without needing a finance degree. And today, we're going to figure out what being on track actually means in 2026, without pretending everybody starts at the same place. Because somewhere right now, there's a 29-year-old making $58,000 who is quietly building a serious fortune. There's a 44-year-old making $180,000 who looks wealthy from the outside but is financially fragile. And there's a 36-year-old making $92,000 who thinks she's too far behind to ever catch up. One of them may become a multi-millionaire. And it might not be the person you expect. Let's start with the number itself. Because $2 million sounds enormous until you ask what $2 million actually has to do. Imagine you're 60 years old. Your house is worth $500,000. You have $1.7 million spread across a 401k, IRA, and brokerage account. You're debt-free. You have no car payment. Your kids are financially independent. On paper, you're worth $2.2 million. Sounds rich, right? Now imagine your annual lifestyle costs $85,000. Your investments have to support that spending. You have taxes, healthcare, home repairs, insurance, inflation, and potentially 25 or 30 years of retirement ahead of you. Suddenly, that $2.2 million doesn't look like a private jet. It looks like something much more useful, freedom. And that's the first mental shift I want you to make. Don't chase multi-millionaire because you want to look rich. Chase it because you want your money to eventually become powerful enough that your paycheck is optional. That's a completely different goal. The Federal Reserve's latest comprehensive survey of consumer finances shows just how misleading the word average can be. The average American family had more than $1 million in net worth, while the median was only around $193,000 in the 2022 survey. Read that again. Average. Over $1 million. Median. About $193,000. That gap is enormous. And it's why you should never hear, the average American has $1 million, and immediately think you're doing something wrong. The average gets pulled upward by households with enormous fortunes. If Warren Buffett walks into a room with 100 people earning ordinary salaries, the average wealth in that room suddenly becomes ridiculous. Nobody else became rich. The math just got distorted. That's why your goal shouldn't be beating some imaginary average American. Your goal should be building enough productive assets that your future becomes increasingly independent from your labor. And here's where the multi-millionaire idea becomes interesting. Let's say you're 25 and have $15,000 invested. You probably don't feel rich. You probably feel like you're staring at a tiny number while rent, groceries, insurance, student loans, and your car payment are all yelling at you. But that $15,000 has something your paycheck doesn't. Time. And time is the secret weapon most people completely underestimate. Now imagine another person. She's 42. She earns $145,000. Her friends think she's crushing it. She drives a nice SUV. She owns a beautiful house in a good suburb. Her family takes one big vacation every year. Her retirement account has $110,000. She contributes when she can. But between the mortgage, daycare, 2 car payments, eating out, subscriptions, travel, and everything else that somehow became normal, she invests only about $500 a month. She isn't irresponsible. She's living a very recognizable American life. And that's exactly the problem. Because wealth rarely disappears through one catastrophic decision. It disappears through hundreds of completely reasonable decisions. It's only $80 a month. It's only another $300 on the car payment. We deserve the bigger house. Everyone else is doing it. I'll increase my 401k contribution next year. Once the kids are older, we'll save more. Once I get promoted, we'll invest more. And then suddenly you're 52. The promotion came. The salary doubled. The lifestyle doubled too. And your net worth barely moved. That's the trap. Income can make you look wealthy without actually making you wealthy. Now let's flip the story. Imagine a 31-year-old named Marcus. He makes $76,000 as a project coordinator in Texas. Nothing about his life screams millionaire. He rents a modest apartment, drives a 6-year-old Toyota, makes coffee at home most mornings. He isn't miserable. He's not living on ramen noodles. He simply decided that every raise would have two destinations. One part toward a better life today, and one part toward buying his future freedom. When his salary went from $68,000 to $76,000, he didn't spend the entire $8,000 raise. He increased his retirement contributions. His employer matched part of it. He opened an IRA. He automatically invested every month. And when his income eventually reached 6 figures, his savings rate increased again. Marcus isn't trying to get rich quick. He's doing something much more boring. He's building ownership. And that's the part of personal finance people skip. A paycheck pays you once. An asset can keep paying you. A share of a business can produce earnings. An index fund can own hundreds or thousands of companies. A rental property can generate cash flow and potentially appreciate. A business can produce profits. Retirement accounts can shelter or defer taxes depending on the account and rules. And your home can build equity, although it isn't the same thing as having liquid investment assets. The goal isn't simply to earn more money. The goal is to gradually convert your labor income into assets that can eventually produce wealth without requiring another hour of your time. That's how the game changes. And 2026 gives you more tax advantage tools than many people realize. For example, the IRS says the employee contribution limit for a 401k is $24,500 in 2026. The IRA contribution limit is $7,500, with higher catch-up limits for older savers. You don't need to max those accounts out immediately. But you should understand something important. These accounts aren't just retirement accounts. They're tools. Tools that can help you invest consistently while potentially receiving tax advantages. And if your employer offers a 401k match, that can make the decision even more important because you're potentially leaving part of your compensation on the table if you don't participate enough to capture the available match. But here's where people make another mistake. They obsess over contribution limits, while ignoring the size of their lifestyle. Imagine two Americans making exactly $100,000. Person A invests $20,000 a year. Person B invests $5,000. Person B might have the nicer house, the newer SUV, the more expensive kitchen, the better vacations. And on Instagram, Person B might look richer. But Person A is purchasing something much more valuable. Future choices. And that's what your net worth really buys. Not Lamborghini keys. Not a giant house. Not a social media screenshot. Choices. The ability to leave a terrible job. The ability to help your parents. The ability to pay for a child's education without destroying your retirement. The ability to handle a $10,000 roof repair without putting it on a credit card. The ability to retire before your body starts begging you to. The ability to say no. That is what we're actually building. Now here's the question I want you to answer before we go any further. Don't look at your salary. Don't look at your neighbor. Don't look at your college roommate who somehow owns a lake house. Look at your own numbers. If your paycheck stopped tomorrow, how long could your current life continue without going into debt? 1 week? 1 month? 3 months? A year? Because that's your first scoreboard. Not millionaire. Not multi-millionaire. Resilience. And once you have resilience, you can start building momentum. Because compounding doesn't care how impressive your salary sounds. It cares about how much capital gets invested, how long it stays invested, and whether you keep interrupting the process. This is where the age question matters. If you're 25, you have an advantage that can't be purchased later. If you're 35, you still have plenty of runway. If you're 45, you need a stronger savings rate and a more intentional strategy. If you're 55, you may need to focus heavily on contributions, taxes, retirement timing, and spending. But here's what I don't want you to do. Don't hear those ages and decide that your situation is hopeless. Because that's another financial trap. You don't need to rewind your life. You need to understand your next 10 years. A 40-year-old who dramatically improves their savings rate today can be in a completely different position at 50. A 50-year-old who eliminates high-interest debt, increases retirement contributions, captures employer benefits, controls lifestyle inflation, and keeps investing can still create substantial wealth. And someone who is 25 can completely change their future by making a few boring decisions consistently. That's why I don't want you thinking about becoming a multimillionaire as one giant mountain. Think of it as stages. First, stop being financially fragile. Then, build your first $100,000. Then, get your investments working harder than your spending habits. Then, cross $500,000. Then something interesting starts happening. The portfolio begins contributing meaningful dollars of its own. You keep adding money, but eventually the market can add an amount that makes your annual contribution look small. That's when wealth starts feeling different. At $10,000 invested, a 10% year gives you roughly $1,000 before considering contributions. At $100,000, the same percentage is $10,000. At $500,000, it's $50,000. At $1 million, it's $100,000. At $2 million, it's $200,000. Same percentage. Completely different dollar impact. And that's why the early years can feel so frustrating. You're doing the work. You're saving. You're investing. And your account barely seems to move. Then one day, the numbers get large enough that the machine starts becoming visible. But there is a catch. And this catch is responsible for destroying more wealth than most people realize. Because compounding works both ways. Investment returns can compound. But so can lifestyle inflation. So can credit card debt. So can car loans. So can unnecessary fees. So can taxes when you don't plan around them. And so can financial mistakes. One bad decision isn't necessarily going to ruin you. But repeating expensive decisions for 20 years absolutely can. That's why becoming a multimillionaire isn't primarily an investing problem. It's a behavior problem wrapped inside a math problem. And once you understand that, the entire roadmap becomes easier. Because you don't need to predict the next hot stock. You don't need to find the next Bitcoin. You don't need to know what the Federal Reserve will do next month. You need a system that keeps moving money from today's labor into tomorrow's ownership. And then you need to protect that system from yourself. Because the person most likely to derail your millionaire plan isn't the stock market. It's the version of you standing inside the dealership saying, "Come on. I can afford the payment. We'll deal with that version of you next." Because before we calculate exactly how much you need to invest to reach $2 million, $3 million, or even more, we need to answer the question that determines whether those numbers are realistic for you. How much of your income should actually be working for your future? And the answer may be very different from the 10% or 15% number you've heard 1,000 times. Because if becoming a multimillionaire is the destination, your savings rate is the engine. The numbers that decide your future. So, how much do you actually need to invest to become a multimillionaire? Here's where personal finance gets interesting. Because the answer isn't, make a huge salary. It's, invest enough, for long enough, without constantly getting in your own way. Let's take 3 Americans. Sarah is 25. She earns $65,000 and invests $700 a month. That's not glamorous. But assuming a long-term 7% annual return, that $700 monthly investment could grow to roughly $1.8 million by age 65. Now meet James. He's 35. Same $700 a month. Same return. By 65, roughly $855,000. 10 years later, same contribution. Less than half the result. That's the power of starting early. But don't misunderstand the lesson. If you're already 35, 40, or 50, this isn't permission to quit. It's a reason to increase the amount you're investing. Because the older you get, the more important your savings rate becomes. Think about it this way. If you're 25 and investing 10% of your income, time is doing a lot of the heavy lifting. At 45, you may need to invest 20%, 25%, or even more depending on your starting point and retirement goal. That's not punishment. That's math. And here's the number I want you to remember. Your savings rate matters more than your salary. Someone earning $80,000 and investing $20,000 every year can be building substantially more wealth than someone earning $150,000 and spending almost all of it. This is why lifestyle inflation is so dangerous. You get a $10,000 raise. Your brain says, "Great, bigger apartment." Then another raise. New SUV. Then another. Let's upgrade the house. Your income rises. Your expenses rise. Your wealth barely moves. Instead, try the 50-50 raise rule. Every time your income increases, send at least half of the after-tax increase toward investing, debt payoff, or another wealth-building goal. You still enjoy the raise. But your future gets a raise too. Now let's talk about where that money should go. For many Americans, the first place to look is the employer-sponsored retirement plan. If your company offers a 401k match, understand the rules and consider contributing enough to capture the full available match. Then look at tax-advantaged options such as an IRA, depending on your eligibility and situation. And don't ignore the tax side of wealth building. A traditional 401k can generally give you a tax deduction today, while withdrawals are generally taxed later. A Roth account generally works in the opposite direction. Contributions are made with after-tax dollars, while qualified withdrawals can be tax-free. Neither is automatically better. Your tax situation matters. And this is where a lot of people make a mistake. They focus entirely on the investment return, while ignoring taxes and fees. Imagine two investors both earn the same gross return. One loses more of that return to taxes, unnecessary fees, and poor account choices. Over 30 years, that difference can become enormous. That's why wealthy people don't just ask, "What did my investment return?" They ask, "What did I actually keep?" Now here's your first real multimillionaire test. Take your current annual income. Multiply it by the percentage you're actually investing. If you earn $100,000 and invest $10,000, your investment rate is 10%. If you earn $100,000 and invest $25,000, it's 25%. If you earn $200,000 and invest $10,000, you may have a high income problem disguised as a wealth building plan. Your target doesn't have to be 50%. It doesn't have to be perfect. But if becoming a multimillionaire is genuinely important to you, your savings rate eventually needs to become one of your biggest financial priorities. Because here's what happens when you cross certain milestones. At $50,000 invested, the market movement feels small. At $250,000, you start noticing it. At $500,000, a normal market year can move your portfolio by tens of thousands of dollars. At $1 million, the numbers become serious. And at $2 million? Your portfolio can potentially produce investment gains larger than many people's annual salaries in a strong year. That's when your relationship with money changes. You're no longer just working for money. Your money is working alongside you. But there's one giant mistake people make when they see those numbers. They assume a 7% return is guaranteed. It isn't. Markets don't move in straight lines. You can have years of strong growth, years of losses, recessions, inflation spikes, and periods where absolutely nothing seems to work. The goal isn't to predict every move. It's to build a financial system strong enough that you don't have to. That means, keep an emergency reserve appropriate for your situation. Control high-interest debt. Take advantage of employer benefits. Use tax-advantaged accounts when appropriate. Invest consistently. Diversify. And most importantly, stay invested. Because the biggest threat to your multimillionaire plan may not be a market crash. It may be panic selling during one. And there's another number you need to understand before we build your personal roadmap. It's not your salary. It's not your 401k. It's not even your investment return. It's the amount of money you're willing to spend without increasing your lifestyle every time your income rises. Because if you can control that one number, your path to $2 million, $3 million, or beyond becomes dramatically clearer. We're going after the biggest wealth killers hiding in everyday American life: the car payment, the house upgrade, taxes, debt, lifestyle creep, and the "I deserve it" purchases that can quietly steal decades of compounding. The wealth killers. Now let's talk about what's quietly destroying your path to becoming a multimillionaire. It's usually not one huge mistake. It's lifestyle creep. You get a raise. Then you upgrade the car. Another raise? Bigger house. Another promotion? More subscriptions, more restaurants, more expensive vacations. Your income keeps climbing, but your investment account doesn't. That's the trap. If every raise becomes a new expense, you'll always feel rich and never become wealthy. And then there's debt. A credit card charging double-digit interest can destroy years of investment growth. A $700 car payment may feel manageable, but $700 invested every month for decades can become a completely different number. Then there's taxes. A high salary doesn't equal high wealth if you're ignoring how your income and investments are taxed. That's why Americans should understand the difference between traditional and Roth retirement accounts, employer benefits, capital gains, and tax-efficient investing. You don't need to become a tax expert. You just need to stop treating taxes as an afterthought. And there's one more wealth killer. Panic. The market drops 25%. Your portfolio looks like it's falling apart. You sell. 6 months later, the market recovers. Now you're sitting on the sidelines watching other people's accounts recover without you. Multimillionaires aren't necessarily better at predicting crashes. They're often better at following a plan when everyone else is losing their mind. So here's your Part 3 checklist. Control lifestyle inflation. Destroy high-interest debt. Use tax advantages intelligently. Keep investing through market volatility. And protect your savings rate when your income rises. Because building wealth is only half the job. Keeping yourself from sabotaging it is the other half. Your multimillionaire roadmap. Now let's turn all of this into something you can actually use. Forget the question. How much should a 40-year-old have? Ask. Am I moving toward financial independence every year? Here's a simple roadmap. Step 1. Build your financial floor. Create an emergency reserve appropriate for your situation. Pay down high-interest debt. Make sure your basic financial life isn't one unexpected expense away from a credit card. Step 2. Capture your employer benefits. If your employer offers a 401k match, understand the match rules and contribute enough to take advantage of the available benefit. Then consider other tax-advantaged accounts you're eligible for. Step 3. Increase your savings rate. Start with what you can handle. Then increase it every time your income rises. A 10% savings rate today can become 15%. 15% can become 20%. And eventually, 20% can become 25% or more. You don't need to get there overnight. You need to keep moving. Step 4. Invest consistently. You don't need to predict which stock will explode next. A diversified, long-term strategy can be far more powerful than constantly jumping between hot investments. The goal is consistency. Step 5. Protect your lifestyle. This might be the most important one. When your income doubles, don't automatically let your lifestyle double. Give yourself some of the raise. Give your future some of it too. Because here's the beautiful part. You don't need to become a millionaire overnight. You need to become the kind of person who keeps buying assets for decades. At first, your contributions do most of the work. Then your investments start helping. Eventually, your portfolio can become powerful enough that its growth in a good year may exceed your annual contributions. That's when wealth starts accelerating. So, are you on track to becoming a multimillionaire? Here's your honest test. Are your assets growing faster than your lifestyle? Is your savings rate increasing as your income increases? Are you using the tax advantages available to you? Are you staying invested instead of constantly chasing the next big thing? And most importantly, are you giving your money enough time to compound? If the answer is yes, you're building the machine. Maybe you're 25 with $20,000. Maybe you're 35 with $100,000. Maybe you're 45 and feel like you're starting late. Your starting point matters. But your direction matters more. Because becoming a multimillionaire isn't about looking rich today. It's about creating a future where your money gives you choices. The choice to retire. The choice to work less. The choice to help your family. The choice to walk away from a bad job. The choice to live without constantly worrying about your next paycheck. So don't obsess over someone else's net worth. Don't panic because you're not where a chart says you should be. And don't wait for the perfect time to start. Build the emergency fund. Capture the match. Increase the savings rate. Invest consistently. Control lifestyle inflation. Then repeat. Because the people who eventually reach $2 million, $3 million, or more usually don't have a secret. They simply kept doing the boring things long enough for the math to become extraordinary. And that's the real definition of being on track. Not looking wealthy. Not earning the most. Not having the fanciest house. Just becoming wealthier year after year. Until one day, your money works harder than you do.